Good morning. First of all, good morning to all of you. And on behalf of Hrant Dink Foundation, I would like to greet you with respect and love. And Hrant Dink Foundation started with Adana, continued with Diyarbakır, Mardin, Van, and now this year Izmir. And maybe you may ask the following question. So, what about academic activities of Hrant Dink Foundation? Are they limited to local history? You may ask this question. Yes, it's possible for you to ask this question, but so we are thinking about these issues, and this local history approach is something that we are thinking about and we invite people to think about. And this is different from our local history approach which developed in the 1930s. So this country has went through a very major venture journey. So I do not only mean people within the territories of Turkish Republic, I mean the entire region, Balkans and Middle East. So people living here between 1850 and 1950, in this century there was really a great adventure. And when we look at the peak point or the main axis or the main change axis of transformation axis of this period, we see that there was an empire structure, and this was transformed into nation states, and this was a painful process, and this was a challenging process full of pain, and so this period created traumas in individuals' lives, and local history started to develop in the 1930s. Maybe you will remember. So CHP created public houses, and these public houses had history commissions, and these there were journals published back then, and there would be local history articles. For instance, in Manisa, there would be an article about a hammam in Manisa, about a pasha. And also in the same magazine, there would be articles about the names of various locations. And when you read these articles together, 5 or 10 articles, you can see the basic message given here, main message given here. We have always been here, we have always existed here, we have always lived here, and since old times, this space is a place where Turkish people lived. So this is the message that they were giving in these articles. And of course, this complied with the ideology of that period. And so this message actually is a different message from the great adventure that I have mentioned. So we are holding these conferences because what we want to do is the following. We want to tell the local stories in connection with this great adventure, and this is why we are writing these invitations and conference texts, so that we can lead our valuable academicians to think over these issues. And so they told me that I was going to hold a speech, and actually Izmir is not a city where I have directly worked on, studied on. However, my professor was from Izmir, my late professor, Professor Müveccel Kray, in 1972. So she made a study for Ankara Sociology Association, and she wrote the first monography about Izmir, a city which cannot create organizations. So I know I was an assistant from the old tradition. Yes, I didn't carry my professor's bags, but still I was very respectful in front of my professor. I would be very respectful in her presence, and therefore I know this city academically a bit, but I thought in the early morning, instead of giving you very many data, I think I wanted to show you some pictures. I have an archive, and let's start now. Let's start with them. So you see that there are English sentences on each picture, and you know that this city was a part of the Aydın province, and I think 1850s it's clarified, and as a result of its integration with the world markets, this city started to become a star. It was a star of the Aegean together with the Thessaloniki, and among the Eastern Mediterranean ports, Thessaloniki, Izmir, Alexandria, Beirut, Iskenderun, and Port Said. So Izmir lived a common story together with these port stories. So there was a great agricultural hinterland behind these port cities, and together with the Aydın railways established by British, this agricultural hinterland was used to export agricultural products from this port. So Izmir is the export center for these agricultural products coming from the hinterland, and you see a nice picture. You see camels in front of Banco di Roma, camel caravans, and in each station in Aydın railways you would see camel caravans where goods were loaded or unloaded, and you see Izmir harbor. So it's the late 19th century, 1860s, and you see in the port people are working really hard, and agricultural raw materials are packed and then made ready for exports. And here, first workers, proletariat of Izmir, fig pickers, women fig pickers who would stack figs and who would pack figs. And of course, it was not only composed of fig, cotton, and tobacco. So there was also carpentry, carpets making, and you see the securities of the Oriental Carpet Manufacturers Limited. It is from the second half of the 19th century, and you see this it was undergoing a transformation, and there were changes in its structure, and a dual structure may appear. On one hand, there are traditional merchants, and on the other hand, there are banks, insurance companies, import and export companies, and also people who start to participate in these economic activities. So we can call entrepreneurs who participate in these activities, and together with them, there would be white-collar employees, secretaries, clerks, and office accountants, and these new groups start to appear, and port cities brought us the core of the first middle class in our society, and these middle classes were different from the Ottoman Pasha families. They didn't have any aristocracy traditions. They didn't have privileges coming from the land. So these people would know foreign languages. They were open to the world, and they would speak world languages. And in Izmir, in the beginning of the 20th century, we know that some newspapers were published in 6 or 7 languages. And being open to world meant being cosmopolitan, and being cosmopolitan meant speaking more than one language, being aware of what was going on, and being able to live in a mixed way. And living in a mixed way does not have to be integration of different parts. So it is a mixture. People are mixed, but they can be side to side. They don't marry each other, but they are aware of each other. And so the major privilege of the empires is to develop this feeling of awareness. They strengthen this awareness. So people of an empire know themselves and know people next to them, and know that people next to them are different. So these are important privileges. And together with the nation state, these privileges are eliminated. Of course, when we start to talk about middle classes, of course, we have to talk about nationalism, which is an important ideology of middle classes. Nationalism is important, particularly in Izmir, where a major portion of the city population was Greeks from Anatolia, and there were also large Greek settlements in the hinterland of Izmir. And in the beginning of the 19th, the Greek government had this irredentist approaches, tendencies, and therefore Anatolia was quite attractive for them. And you see the landing of the Greek army on the 15th of May 1990. And probably this is a hotel on Cordolia, and people were standing on the tables and they were watching the navy, Greek navy. And here, so this is a rare picture, and you see Greek troops that are marching on the quay. And when we look at our history, the Turkish history, independence war was important, but this independence war is called as Asia Minor catastrophe in the history of Greeks. So this is a weird interaction. So Greek state gave an independence war in 1920s, and it was established in 1932, and later Turkish nationalism defined themselves against Greeks, and between 1999 and 1923 it created its nation state. You cannot change the geography and you cannot change your fate. And this is quite interesting. This quite interesting union, this quite interesting connection was disturbs how Greeks and Turks see their own histories. The child is right, because you know it's very early in the morning. Of course she will be bored to listen to me. I should be inseparable for her, but when we look at the future, we see that it has led to creation of certain dilemma. And years ago, I spent a year in Harvard University, and there was a barber that I was going, and that barber was in Athens. And when after he was from Athens, after he learned that I was from Turkey, we started to discuss these issues. And he said we must stop teaching history to our kids, Professor Aktar. So this is what he told me. So this was a very important comment coming from a barber. I think this was a very accurate and rightful comment. And it's very difficult for us to stop teaching history, but maybe we can learn how to teach them correctly. So this is why I'm making this speech. What about, so this adventure was ended with a disaster. On the 9th of September, Turkish troops entered Izmir, and on the 13th of September a great fire started, and with the effect of the wind the entire Greek neighborhood quarter was destroyed, and the front line was defeated, and the Greek troops escaped, and they left in almost a month from the Urla quay, and this was the most traumatic month in the history of this city.
Along with the Greek army, Greek Anatolians, of course, tried to go to the other side. This was unavoidable. Those who were working on the exchange depict this first period as a period full of sorrow. And there is a second round of this. a year, 1.5 years later, the Muslims from the other side start to come to Anatolia. So for the both parties, this is the end of a multicultural, multinational life. Everyone starts to build up their national walls. Between 1990 and 1922 in Izmir, there is an important guy appointed by Venizelos, Stergiaris, the governor of Izmir. Unfortunately, there is no nice biography written on Stergiaris. It's a very dramatic personality. If I knew it, I would try to write it. This person was selected, appointed specifically, and he acts as a British colony governor. Between Muslims and Greeks, he sees no difference. That's why the Greeks of Smyrna hates him. So he is an interesting person. He wants to establish a university. Maybe tomorrow we will be hearing a presentation about this topic. And this university is called Ionian University of Smyrna, and everything about the university is ready in August 1922. Even the desks are there, but in September 1922 everything started to change with the collapse of the front. The building for the university is converted to the İzmir Girls College. This is the picture of that building. After 1923, Izmir starts to shrink, become more introverted. It's like washing a wool pullover in 60 centigrade degrees in the washing machine. This adventure between 1919 and 1922 this also brought some interesting conclusions for the city. Levantines, for instance, they make the connection of the city with the exterior world. We have the producers as well, and we have Greek merchants who are executing the transaction. When they were forced to leave the land, the Muslim producers cannot find people to sell their products, and Levantines have no idea about the outside world. This break point actually identifies the oppositional attitude of Izmir, especially after the world economic crisis. This free political party, when the head of that political party, Fethi Bey, comes to the city, shows him great interest and love, because the city needs a hero. The city who applauded the Turkish troops a couple of years ago, now they turned into themselves. And with the establishment of the Democratic Party, Izmir was again a moving force. So this city, this is the drama of a city who was part of the world economy and lost this connection. This is almost like a man who lost everything and tried to live on a very limited budget. But of course some novelties emerge in the city. Again, this is a picture from 1923 who are giving the welcoming ceremony to Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Yes, we are building walls. The walls are being constructed, but some new agreements, contracts also being signed. For instance, this is Greek Prime Minister Eleftherios and Venizelos visiting Ankara. A new deal was signed in 1930, and this period, which will continue till 1955, till Cyprus starts. This is a picture from Urla from 1935. This is a Republic Day celebration. I think this is much better. This microphone is better. And this is the scene reflecting Republican romanticism. You see people in very smart clothes, in flowers. This is a celebration. Of course, we experienced the nationalization of the daily life in 1930s, and then we have this burned Greek neighborhood turns into the Izmir International Fair. When we carry along with the adventure of Izmir, this is one of the important turning points in 1950s. This picture tells a lot to us about 1950s. So the increase in the population of Izmir with the immigration from the rural areas, and there is a more homogeneous population now. And at the end of this adventure, we see a national city, a Turkish city, intensified at the end of this adventure. And when we take all these into consideration, this conference, the presentations to be delivered in this conference, they all actually will tell us about this transition from a multinational community to national community. And let me point out something to academicians from Izmir. I actually expected more academicians from Izmir to take part in this conference. We received fewer requests from academicians. I hope in the following years, in the future, we receive more demand from academicians from Izmir. Vangelis Kehriotis was the person whom I wanted him to be part of this conference. I'm sure that he's watching us from above. We named him as the foreign son-in-law. This was a famous TV show. It was shown in Greece as well. The name in Greek television was Love Without Borders, I think. We gave him the same name. His wife Jada is here today with us. We're happy to see her here. And despite everything, it is actually a great joy to be able to organize these conferences. When we were walking on the Assad text, I read the memoirs of Sir Huguet. He was first appointed to China in 1930s, and he receives this letter of appointment. And when he was circling the corridors of the foreign ministry in England, he sees an experienced ambassador. He checks, "Did you learn your place?" He says, "Yes." "Where is it?" "It's Peking." And he says, "Yeah, it's an interesting place. You should see that place." And there is this curse by Chinese people. They tell you that may you live in interesting times. This is a curse by Chinese people. And what does this mean, he asks. This interesting times in Chinese terminology is something referring to when everything changes, all traumatic experiences are experienced. So Chinese people call these times as interesting times. So if you want to wish something bad to someone, you use that curse. And I think this curse was right about us. I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.